Brothers and sisters, today as a Dominican order, we're very proud to celebrate the feast of St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the great luminaries and lights in the church, known as the great doctor of the church because of his profound search for truth and articulation of the mystery of God in a way that has made so many issues much clearer for the mind of the church. But today as a Dominican order, we celebrate in a special way a double jubilee for the next year, because we celebrate from today 800 years since his canonization, 800 years since his death, but also 700 years since his canonization. So there's this double jubilee, and the order requested from the Holy See to apply the keys of St. Peter, to apply the authority given to the church to offer on behalf of the Lord a plenary indulgence to souls who will, go to Eucharistic celebrations of the Mass at Dominican priories in honor of the feast and other events to do with the Jubilee, and also plenary indulgence to be given to those who will go on pilgrimage to shrines and oratories and churches dedicated to St. Thomas Aquinas throughout the world. And so this plenary indulgence is to be received as much as we make these visits for the next year. And the typical conditions of the plenary indulgence is to pray for the intentions of the Holy Father, normally an Our Father and a Glory Be, or pray the Creed, to seek confession within 1 week of seeking the plenary indulgence, to attend Mass in honor of it as well, this indulgence, and also to have a firm resolve not to be attached to any particular sin. So if we could talk a little bit about St. Thomas, what can we say? He's written volumes and volumes of things. Incredible amounts. I'm going to speak about his Eucharistic love, because more and more I'm realizing him as a friend, a heavenly friend, to guide me in my own Eucharistic devotion. And more I'm discovering how central is Eucharistic devotion in a particular way to our own Dominican charism. It's central to the church, but it seems to have a real stress in these Dominican saints. They seem to spend a lot of their prayer before the tabernacle, before the risen Lord in the Eucharist. And St. Thomas would spend hours, so much so that he would celebrate Mass twice a day, in the sense that he will offer Mass as a priest, but then he would serve somebody else's Mass. And in Mass, he would often be seen to be crying with tears, so touched by the mystery of redemption that is being celebrated and made present in the holy sacrifice of the Mass. And also as a priest, to hold the living God in his hands, to hold his Savior in his hands, and to know that the immense gift of that love of the Eucharist, that the Lord humbles himself in such this incredible way so that he can come to us. And as a friend of mine who we were doing spiritual direction early on today, and she was speaking about how much the Eucharist, when it comes to us, the way that Jesus comes to us in the Eucharist, and how much he acts so freely in us when we open our hearts wide to him in the Eucharist. So St. Thomas in many ways is known as a great poet of the Eucharist, not only a theologian of the Eucharist, but he wrote many important hymns, Eucharistic hymns that are now part of the church. Many have heard the Adorate Devote or the Pange Lingua. There's so many other hymns. Pope Urban IV in around the mid-13th century wanted to institute a feast of Corpus Christi, and he asked St. Thomas Aquinas in Orvieto, in Italy, to write this Mass of Corpus Christi to honor the body, blood, and soul and divinity of Jesus in the Eucharist. So St. Thomas was commissioned with this great honor to honor the Eucharist with these prayers and hymns for the liturgy. So this came forth from this Dominican charism in this incredible way. And more I see how central the Eucharist is to St. Thomas's own life. He, as I said early on, even he would go and put his head on the tabernacle, or be near the tabernacle, begging God for light, for things that he would be writing on, searching for light, searching for wisdom. And one of the things that I'm writing on in my own thesis for my license is that I'm studying on the Eucharist, but looking at the Eucharist as Jesus, the wisdom incarnate, the wisdom of God, and how Jesus is coming to us as wisdom as well in the Eucharist, not only to burn our hearts with greater love, but to also enlighten our minds with light and wisdom. And from my research, St. Thomas clearly understands this sapiential, this wise dimension to the Eucharistic Lord, that he calls him the bread of angels. Now, angels have no bodies, so what is it? How can we call it the Eucharistic bread of angels? And of course, he's being very scriptural here because of the manna that came down from heaven, that the Book of Wisdom called the bread of angels. Well, angels have no bodies in heaven, but they feed nevertheless off of the eternal wisdom of God, or by looking at God and feeding off of that divine vision, sustains them in existence. But that wisdom that they see became flesh in Jesus Christ, and St. Thomas honors that. And he says, a great line that I love, he says in one of his hymns, faith alone sees his face. So when we go to the adoration, faith alone will see Jesus' face in the Eucharist.